Hello, this is John Creswell. I'm speaking to you from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. I've been creating these video series on mixed methods research, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about what skills are needed to conduct mixed methods research. And there are several skills that are needed for a person to really do this form of inquiry. One is that you need skills in how to understand the general research process. So I'll go through a few slides about that. Skills in understanding quantitative research, then skills in understanding qualitative research, and then finally skills in understanding mixed methods research. So in many ways this will be a primer on the basics of quantitative research and qualitative research, and that'll lead us then into mixed methods research. I think there's some misconceptions out there about what it takes to do mixed methods research, and often people feel that because there's so much data going on in a mixed method study that one can shorten or abbreviate either the quantitative or qualitative. But the reality is, in a good mixed method study, there's both a rigorous qualitative and quantitative research, and this is what I want to convey here today. So let's first start with the general research process. As we all know, when you do a research project, there are certain steps that a person goes through, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods research. I've put together a visual here that shows the general steps in mixed methods, in the process of research for mixed methods research. It begins by identifying a research problem, and then reviewing the literature, and then specifying the purpose and the questions, then collecting the data, analyzing the data, making some interpretation of the data, and then evaluating and writing up the results for whatever audiences you're working with. So these are the general steps that people go through, typically in a sequence, one following the other, but not always. But they're good steps to have in mind as you're thinking through the entire process of research. And whether you're doing quantitative or qualitative or mixed, these are the steps that we'll be going through, and they became evident way back in the beginning of the 20th century, the early time period when quantitative research was being formed. And then throughout the middle part of the 20th century, qualitative research emerged and became popular across the social sciences. And now more recently, in the last 25 years, we have mixed methods research that really bridges both quantitative and qualitative. So in order to do good mixed methods research, a person needs a good foundation in quantitative research. I put together some of the key elements of doing a good quantitative study. First of all, variables are central to doing this type of research. You identify your variables and use those then to describe trends and general relationships. Often these trends and explanations are based on some larger theory, some larger explanation. And then you narrow your study to specific questions, or in some cases it might be hypotheses. You then gather data on instruments, close-ended instruments, such as an attitudinal scale. After gathering the data, you conduct statistical analysis that ranges from a very simple type of analysis like descriptive onto a more sophisticated analysis such as inferential statistics. And then we find in quantitative research that the researcher packages their study in a rather standard format that might go from problem to questions to the literature review to the results, to the data collection and to the results. So there's a standard format for doing quantitative research. I put together a checklist that you might find helpful if you're doing a quantitative study. There are some general guidelines at the beginning of this checklist why are you doing quantitative research, and what type of specific design are you using, such as an experiment or a survey. And then what might be some of the potential threats to validity for using that type of a design. And then you engage in quantitative data collection, going through information about the site that you're studying, the permissions you might gain, how you're going to recruit participants into the project, how many would be recruited, and the different types of data that might be used that you would collect information on, and then the specific data types, such as close-ended scales that have certain observational characteristics, or rating scales, and you're paying attention to some key points that are always part of good quantitative research, such as reliability of the data, the generalizability of the information, the validity of the scores from your instruments. You might also then include quantitative data analysis, which has certain steps. You input your database into a statistical program. You then clean up the database. You're using some type of a software program like SPSS or SAS. You then conduct a general descriptive analysis of the database, such as means, standard deviations, variances. And then you might use more advanced statistical techniques such as inferential statistics, correlation analysis, chi-squares, more sophisticated regression analyses, etc. In the end, you're going to be reporting whether there's a significant difference in the relationship among your variables or among your groups using p-values, confidence intervals, and effect sizes. And you would present your information in a series of tables. So this is a checklist that I would use for writing my method section in a quantitative study that covers both the general ideas as well as data collection and analysis procedures. Now, if you're doing a randomized control trial, an experimental trial, there are guidelines out there that you should be aware of. In 2010, the Annals of Internal Medicine reported a consort guidelines, which gives more specific detail about the types of steps that would go into a randomized control trial, an experimental study. There are certain types of designs that are used in quantitative projects. In the social sciences, we tend to think of these designs. There's a true experiment, where we're looking at the cause of a treatment on an outcome, and we're randomly assigning people to different groups. It might be a quasi-experimental design, where we are again looking at the impact of a treatment on an outcome, but we don't necessarily assign people randomly to different groups. Single subject research is another form, where we're testing certain individuals experimentally as to how they how they are impacted by an intervention, and we're typically observing their behavior over time. Single subject research. We often do correlational designs where we correlate variables. We look at the relationship among a large number of variables to see if they're highly associated. And then we often do survey research as well, where we might send out a questionnaire to a large number of people and ask for their opinions and come up with the trends on a certain subject. When you turn to the health sciences, there are similar designs, but they go by different names. Two broad categories are shown in this visual. Observational explanatory studies, where we're just trying to describe a case, where we're looking at cross-sectional information, where we're following a cohort or a group of people over time. Then we also have experimental designs, controlled studies, such as a randomized controlled trial, a systematic review, a meta-analysis. So there are different types of experimental designs that are used with slightly different names, but basically they're similar to the social science quantitative designs. There are lots of books out there on quantitative research, and you can pick up one that looks at statistics, one that gets into specialized advanced statistical procedures like structural equation modeling, books on measurement, books on how to do experiments, and in this visual I just give an example of 4 different types of books. So you need the skills in quantitative research to do mixed methods. You also need the skills in qualitative research. Qualitative research is different in many ways from quantitative approaches. First of all, you're exploring just one idea, one central concept. We call it a central phenomenon. And then you're asking people open-ended questions. You're not using rating scales, you're not using instruments, just very general open questions, because your intent is to get their perspective on the topic. You're collecting these detailed views of participants. You then analyze this data that you've collected in terms of describing how people are perceiving this phenomenon, and in terms of more general themes. And you categorize your data into broad themes. You make some meaning of these themes, building an interpretation, and often you bring yourself in as a researcher, which is called reflexivity. The reporting format for qualitative study varies from study to study. There's a more flexible procedure for how you might put together the study. It might begin with the question, and it might go into some stories, and then the method might come in a little bit later on. So it doesn't exactly follow the sequence, that standard sequence that we talked about in quantitative research. Again, I put together a checklist. If you're doing a qualitative study, here's a good checklist for your data collection procedures and your data analysis procedures. I also start with some general guidelines on selecting what type of qualitative design you're using, whether it's an ethnography, a grounded theory, a phenomenology, and also giving a rationale for why you're using qualitative research. That's important today. A lot of people are new to qualitative and they need a reason for why you're using this particular approach to your study. In terms of data collection, here are similar ideas to what I talked about in quantitative research, but we probably have some different terms here. You do select a site and get permission to go into the site. You recruit participants, but usually the number of participants is small, and they are purposefully selected, which means they're selected because they're good people that can help you understand this one phenomenon that you're exploring. You often include demographics about these participants. You talk about the benefits of collecting data for them. You specify the type of qualitative data, which typically falls into open-ended interviews, open-ended observations, documents, and audiovisual material. And so the list for qualitative data collection is quite lengthy. It includes very interesting approaches these days, such as using text messages or web pages or sounds or photographs of people. You then often collect data using specific protocols, which give you guidance as a researcher as to what general questions to ask. And often you state the research questions that are being addressed in the study. In terms of data analysis, you prepare the qualitative data for typically input into a software program. One that I particularly use is MaxQDA, but there are several qualitative software programs. Then there are specific procedures that I would use, such as describing what the participants are saying, coming up with themes, perhaps organizing the themes into a storyline. I'm also very aware of the need for validating the accuracy of this interpretation in qualitative research, so I use some validation strategies, such as checking the story back with people that I talk to, or reliability strategies such as using multiple coders. I include within my methods some comments about myself, where I talk about what my past experiences have been with this phenomenon I'm exploring, and how these past experiences may have shaped my interpretation. There's many different designs out there in qualitative research. I want to emphasize the 5 that I write about in one of my books. First of all, there's narrative research as an approach to qualitative. This is typically where you report the story of one or more individuals. It's a storytelling, literary way of constructing and writing up qualitative research. There's also phenomenological research. That is where I identify a specific phenomenon that I want to explore. I typically go out and interview a number of people, and I describe in my qualitative report how they're experiencing this phenomenon. That's phenomenology. Grounded theory is just as the name suggests. I'm going to develop a theory that's grounded in the views of participants. So I may go out and talk to 15 or 20 people and ask them to address what process are they experiencing in a particular area of their life, like the process of developing a curriculum for a class. And I'll get their views together, and in the end I want to put together a theory that explains what that process is. I often do case study research as well, where I select one or more individuals, or it could be a program or an activity, and I want to give an in-depth analysis of that one case, drawing on multiple sources of information, where I describe in great detail what that case is like. And then finally, ethnography, which is an approach that originally came out of anthropology, and that's to study the patterns and beliefs and language of a culture sharing group. So I might study a group that I'm not familiar with, like the Maori tribe in New Zealand, and gather information through observations, interviews, as to how this tribe's culture actually works. I would then describe it, I might mention the themes, and in the end make some generalizations about how they talk, how they behave, how they act in this culture sharing group. There are some guidelines out there for good qualitative research. One that I would direct you to is this one. This is the web page from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, where they had a team of researchers put together some very specific guidelines about how to do qualitative research. There are also some books on qualitative research that I recommend. I listed mine in here, Qualitative Inquiry and Research Design. There's also a good one by Joe Maxwell on qualitative research design, the handbook on qualitative research, and a book by Marshall and Rossman on designing qualitative research. These are 4 books that I would recommend for you to get some background in qualitative research. Now, the final set of skills you need, of course, would be skills in mixed methods research. I just want to show you a diagram here of the type of courses we have here at Nebraska that build towards mixed methods research. A person that wants to do a thesis or dissertation in mixed methods would proceed through a quantitative strand of courses and a qualitative strand. On the quantitative side, they would take a measurement course, a statistics course, and probably a general quantitative design course, such as our course on correlation analysis. On the qualitative side, they would take an introduction to qualitative research, and then they would move on to a more advanced course in one of the specialized designs. For example, they might take a course on grounded theory, or discourse analysis, or case study research. So once a person has courses on both of these strands, then they are adequately prepared to move into a mixed methods project where they would be combining both quantitative and qualitative research. And as you move forward in mixed methods, there are specific skills that you need to think about too, because the field has developed into a technical field of doing research. Knowing how to create a mixed methods title, knowing how to put together a mixed methods question, which is a new type of question that we don't really have in our methods research books. Knowing what philosophies and theories and how to use them in mixed methods. Coming up with rigorous methods. Thinking through the different types of mixed method designs that are out there and choosing one that would work to study your problem. And how you then visualize that design by drawing a diagram. And then how to integrate data when you have both text and numbers and you're trying to put them together. And then also how to write a mixed methods journal article, because mixed method studies tend to be long and you need to think about how you're going to shorten them for certain journals that have restricted page limits. So these skills can be obtained through a number of ways. One is, of course, to take courses, as I illustrated our courses here at Nebraska. You could engage in training through certain workshops that are available around the country from time to time. If you go to the Mixed Methods International Research Association website, you'll see a listing of some of the current training workshops. Self-study. You could read through some of those books on mixed methods that I've mentioned. And of course, one of the best ways is to apprentice with someone who knows mixed methods research and actually sit in with them on a project and work through the various steps. So what are the skills that are needed to be a good mixed methods researcher? A knowledge of the general steps of research design. Knowledge about the basics of quantitative research, especially how to collect and analyze quantitative data. Skills in qualitative research. Again, knowing how to collect good qualitative data and how to analyze it. And finally, skills in mixed methods research, which can be based on courses, experiences, your readings, where you then start delving more deeply into some of these specialized topics that emerge, such as creating titles, creating research questions, knowing how to jointly display or integrate quantitative and qualitative data. And these points will be part of my future videos that I hope to share with you. Thank you.